We're sitting here having a great conversation with Amanda Condict. Amanda, thank you for coming. You were just telling us about the pandemic and how difficult it has been because you're such a social person and your art has grown out of that. Can you tell us about being a social person and the pandemic and how your art here that we're looking at has grown out of that experience?
Well, I think that's been the hardest thing for me with the pandemic, is not necessarily the fear of getting sick or anything like that, but the being separated from people, because I feel very strong connection to people. I always have. That's why I've always drawn and painted people more than anything else. And I just found it very difficult to not have that connection, to only be, in my house with my husband and nobody else, And the way this started was, it wasn't like because I was craving people, I just started randomly drawing people, but I've always been attracted to faces, and sometimes what I paint sometimes is just something, I see something and for some reason it grabs me, and I'm not sure why, but usually it's a person, a pose or a face or a scene with people in it. And it was the case of where I was on Facebook, and a young acquaintance of mine who works with the park system, and she was temporarily moved over to being on the COVID Center helpline, I think it was called. And she posted a picture of herself with a mask on. You could only see her eyes, but her eyes are beautiful, and she was looking straight at the camera, and the mask was bright red, when I'm attracted to bright colors. And it just struck me, like, wow, it's a cool picture. So I texted her and said, hey, Lisa, do you mind if I paint you? She goes, oh no, great, go ahead. No one ever painted me. So I did, and I posted it. And I was amazed at the response that I got from that. And so then someone else said to me, well, hey, would you do my sister who's a nurse or whatever? So I did that and got wonderful response again. So then people just started sending me pictures. And the stories I find fascinating because it gives you a glimpse into their personality a little bit. So people first people started sending me pictures, or can I send you one, or, some people of themselves, some people of a relative or a friend or whatever. And then I'd usually ask, well, I need to know the story. Can I talk to the person, or can you tell me something about them? And I just became more and more fascinated with all these different people doing their job because they were committed to it. They, in spite of like what could have been like overwhelming risk, really, to their health and their safety. And how much people appreciated it when I posted them, and how much people would say, God bless you, and it's just, it became like, I became sort of addicted to it. I was posting one every single day, and if I missed a day, I would be really upset about it, But then with my teaching and stuff, I kind of got sucked into other things, and I haven't been doing it as much as I'm going to get back to it.
When you say you posted them, where did you post them?
On Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
Yeah, I usually post on both together when I do something like this.
Can you tell us maybe a correlation between the stories and the paintings? What motivates you within that? What do you need from the story in order to be able to produce the painting?
Well, I like the story to be something that gives you a glimpse into the person's personality. The reason they do what they do, or just like their soul almost, like what they're thinking, who they are. Some of the stories are much, much more heartrending than others. And in fact, one, which I'm pretty sure is down at Studio B, so I don't have it here, was a 31-year-old nurse who was supervisor of a nursing home. And she got COVID and she died. And she is the daughter of a friend of a friend. And when this friend of a friend saw that I was doing these, she said, hey, you need to do my friend's daughter, Katie, And that one was just so heartbreaking because she was 31 years old. She loved her job as a supervisor in this nursing home. She loved all the patients. She recently had a new boyfriend who I think was about to propose to her. I think he had already bought the ring. Her parents were so proud. She was close to her family. Her parents were so proud of her. She got COVID. She wasn't seriously ill, but of course she couldn't go to work. She didn't feel well. Her parents went over one night to her apartment and brought her dinner, and she was so upset because the patients missed her. She said, I don't know what, I need to be there, they need me, and that's all she could think of was the patients. And she was crying about it, and her parents, calmed her down and said, look, just, you need to get your rest, get your sleep, you'll be back there in a couple of weeks, don't worry about it. And they brought her dinner and left it on the table. Next morning they called and she didn't answer. And they called after 4 or 5 phone calls and no answer. They drove over there and she was dead.
Oh my goodness.
Just like
how
that.
tragic.
You know, it must have been more. I'm guessing it was one of those cases with the blood clot or something, like that. And it just struck me as like, here's this young girl, 31 years old, who, at that age, most people are still thinking of themselves more than anything else. And all she could think of was her patients and how sad that she wasn't with them. And she's the person that you would think, she wasn't that dreadfully sick. You would think she would have gotten over it and been back to work, but boom, just like that, she was gone, and it really hit me hard, So hers was a little bit sort of hokey because I did hers, I drew some angel wings behind her. I just, I guess I thought too of my own daughter who's not much older than that, and it made me sad.
When we look at the series and with your intention to do more of this, what are you ultimately, what's happening with you and COVID, and what are you maybe wanting your viewers to get out of seeing these pictures or the whole series of pictures?
The humanity of it, the fact that we're all in this together, it's not a hoax. It's not, I get annoyed, and I'm not a political person. I don't get into politics a lot, but I do get annoyed when people can't even wear a mask because it's inconvenient. They can't breathe very well, but yet it's been proven that 60 to 80% effective in stopping the spread. How selfish is that, And I'm hoping, these I think for the most part have really brought out the best in people. Like they see it, they make comments, they thank the people for their service. And I think that it's just like the whole bringing people together, making them realize we're all in this together, we have to pull together, we have to follow certain rules to get us out of this. I think that's the best that this could achieve.
So it's really an encouragement to humanity, but it's also an encouragement for people to wear masks in maybe a subtle way or a not so subtle way. So in many ways you're using art to convey a message that may only be able to be conveyed through art in this form of art.
Right, I think that wasn't my intent when I started, but when I saw people's reactions, I realized that by showing people wearing masks and doing their job and being noble, quote unquote, it's encouraging good, positive stuff. It's not the divisiveness we have or the usual spreading of rumors and junk on Facebook. This is like spreading a positive thing that could help bring people together, and I like that.
You've got a bunch of these paintings here. Can you just tell us the process of making one or more? How long does it take? When do you do it? Describe the process, etc.
Okay, well the process is that usually, first of course, someone sends me a photograph. I don't get to pick the photograph. They send me a photograph that, sometimes they send me 2 or 3 and I can pick from them. Now some of them I've taken myself, like this is a grocery store clerk in Topton where I shop, and she was just such a cute, friendly, happy person that I asked if I could take her picture for the series. But most of them people send me the pictures. So the process is I look at the picture. I still have a file folder of probably 30 of them on my computer that I haven't done yet. But I look at the picture and I think, I kind of look at the person's face and get a sense for who they are, feeling of, most of them are looking directly at you. And of course with the mask on, the eyes become much more compelling. Kind of live with it for a day or two and kind of sort of get a sense of who I feel the person might be. And then I just paint it in watercolor. I usually do a light pencil sketch, put the watercolor on, and when I first started doing them, I've done quite a bit of watercolor, but it has never been my main method of art. I feel through this series of doing these, I've done maybe 30 or 40 of them maybe by now. I feel like I've really gotten a lot better at watercolor. I really learned a lot. When I first started them, it took me several hours to do one. I wanted to get it down. I kept bragging to myself, my goal was, you should be able to do one of these in less than 2 hours. I think there was 1 or 2 that maybe I got down to about 2 hours, but for the most part, I said they take me 3 or 4 hours each.
You just mentioned that watercolor is not your primary medium. Can you tell us what your primary medium is?
Well, I don't probably have one. You could say I'm an eclectic artist, or you could say I have ADD, which is also true. But I just sort of skip back and forth I paint a lot. I used to love drawing. I did mainly drawing for years, and then I started doing some painting, and now I'm more into painting than drawing. I paint more in acrylics than oils. I do mixed media. I do digital photo manipulation. One of my series a year or so before this was, I called it my Barbie series, and I would take family pictures or friends pictures, like group scenes, going shopping at a picnic, whatever, and I would digitally put a Barbie into the scene. And I loved it because people would look at, and I would just print them like a regular 4x6 print and mat them and frame them. And I think that they were in an exhibit here quite a few years ago. I had an exhibit here. I love the fact that people would look at it and go, oh, that's a Barbie doll in there, you know. And it was a lot of fun. And it was also a great challenge technically for me because making the Barbie fit into the right color range, the right light and shadow. You know, I would go to great pains to, like if it was an outdoor scene at high noon, I'd wait till high noon and take the Barbie outside and photograph her, try to get the same lighting, you know. If it was an old family photograph that was sort of blurry, I'd have to like blur out the Barbie a little bit. And I really tried to make it so that you couldn't, it was seamless. You almost didn't even notice the Barbie was there. And I think my crowning achievement was I had some of them in a show up in Scranton about 2 years ago, and someone who is an executive for Mattel saw them and loved them and bought one of them.
Oh, what a great thing.
Yeah.
Where did the inspiration for the Barbie paintings come from? How did that enter into your imagination?
Well, I've always liked dolls. The people thing, little people, dolls, masks, things that have faces, that have personality, you know. And for a while when I was younger, I collected dolls. And then after, I guess I was moving up to here like 20 years ago, and I realized, what am I going to do with this doll collection, you know? So I ended up selling it all. But I saved the Barbies just because of, I don't know, it just, I guess one day, because I had the digital skills, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun? I did the first one, it was my husband, and I put a Ken doll, right? He was like standing, like looking like just really happy and goofy, and he was unshaven, and he put his arm over something, and I thought, that should be a person he has his arm around. So I took his picture, and I put a Ken doll there. And my first comment on Facebook was, where did you find that life-size Ken doll? So then it amused me. It amused me, so I did it for a couple of years, you know.
How interesting that this art that you're doing really has a sense of responding to a situation, and there's a kind of a seriousness in the message, but you also have done things that are lighthearted and fun, and so in terms of art, you seem to be very versatile in terms of the outcome.
All
that
over
you're
the place.
wanting. Yes.
Scattered.
Can you talk about that serious and the funness and some of the whimsical parts of what you do?
Well, I'm not really that serious about anything, I don't think. Well, no, I don't know. That's not the right.
These seem pretty serious, at least in terms of the outcome that they're
Right,
generating.
which I think was sort of accidental. I think the first one I did was just I was intrigued by her face. But as I started getting the response is when I started becoming more serious. And I like I said, I kind of thought maybe it could do some good, and that seemed like a good thing. And I shouldn't say I'm not that serious about anything. I get serious about things, but really life is about enjoying it. You know, if you can't have fun with things, then what's the point? You know, so that's why I think that a lot of my art might be fun. Even some of my serious art is like a little more fun than this. Like one of the last series I did before this was called Saints and Sinners, and I did like religious type icons, paintings, but I used different people, either famous people or friends or relatives, and I painted them into in some kind of old-fashioned religious pose, you know, or holding something religious, and put them in a fancy ornate frame, like a little wall, shrine or something. Mm-hmm. I did Molly Crabapple as a wall shrine with candles in front of her, and it was sort of funny, but it also kind of says something. Like, and it's oftentimes, like when I do these kind of things, I don't decide on the narrative and then paint it. I just start doing things, and then sort of a narrative comes from it. So I think after I did about a half a dozen of those, I realized what it's talking about is, like, who really is the saint and who really is the sinner, and who gets to decide, like, who you should worship or who's good or who's bad. You know, so one of the pieces was my son's girlfriend's brother is, I'm not sure what I don't want to say androgynous, but he dresses in dresses, and he lives in Samoa, and he works for the National Health Service, and he really is like a saint. I mean, they've been fighting that measles outbreak, and he's a beautiful person, physically and mentally. And I saw a photograph of him in a dress in front of the beach with it, like this, and I just thought he looks like a saint. So I painted him in his dress, when they put the religious stuff around him, and really like who's to decide,
So these were not necessarily classic saints canonized by the Roman Catholic Church, but your discernment of saints.
People that looking somewhat like
Sure.
saintly poses with halos and the whole bit.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
You said earlier in my conversation with you that you were a fashion illustrator and also that you worked in design at some level. Can you tell us a little about that background so it helps us to understand where the technical skill to do this kind of art comes from?
Okay, well, when I first started, my first job in advertising was I worked as an illustrator in Boscov's department stores way back in the 70s. And back then we didn't use photography in the ads because they didn't reproduce very well. So we literally, the 5 of us drew everything in the store to go into the ads.
When you say you drew everything in the store, each item of clothing, you drew this thing?
Clothing and basketballs and sleds. Now some things, of course, they sent in art, like some major appliances, the companies would send us artwork. But everything was illustrated for Boscov's ads. Their ads took up half of the Sunday paper. So we literally sat there all day and drew stuff. The buyers would bring stuff downstairs, the clothing, or bring us the toys or whatever it was, and we would literally draw it, pen and ink, paste it into the layouts and send it to the paper, and that's how it got
Was
reproduced.
the pressure to get this done overwhelming? I would imagine that I would be ready for a nervous collapse if I had to do that.
I operate well. I need a deadline.
You operate well under pressure.
Yes, I without a deadline, I don't do anything. So classically, deadlines is what gets stuff done for me. So maybe because of my training, maybe because I did that all my life. But after that, I worked for what was called County Life magazine, which is kind of like Berks County Living. It was a previous incarnation. And when they went bankrupt or closed down or whatever they did after 5 years, I had been doing some freelance work for different people that took ads in the magazine, and so I started my own business then. Rather, I had unemployment as a buffer, and I just started taking on work, and that's what I did the rest of my career. To the point, till finally, by the time I was in my 40s, I had a company where I had other people working for me. Up until that last recession, 2008 or whenever that was, I had 10 employees, and we did all of the textbooks. We designed and illustrated and produced all of the textbooks for Empire Beauty Schools. The cosmetology textbooks. We did. I did catalogs for like GK Elite, who does that Olympic gymnastic wear and stuff. We did their entire skating line. So we did the illustrations. We hired the photographers. We put it together into catalogs, had them printed. So that's what I did for 40 years.
And now you've got such a versatile, varied background. You are now working at as an adjunct instructor at Albright University. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing there?
Well, I teach in the fashion department. I teach not the sewing and that kind end of it. I teach the graphic design and illustration end of it. So what my standard fare is I teach what's called visual literacy for fashion, which is a foundation course for all freshmen that come into the fashion department, where I teach the art and design principles and the beginning of how to use Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator, which is very heavily used in the industry. And I have them doing creative projects, and so it's freshmen every semester. Sometimes they call on me to teach fashion illustration, or I've taught CAD for fashion. I've taught branding communications for fashion. So anything in my wheelhouse is kind of like the advertising, illustration, graphic design end. So I pretty much teach whatever they ask me to teach.
I've got this question. So your artistic career has involved all kinds of things, professionally and personally, and in response to different situations. What is an artist? When you think of an artist and you think of yourself as an artist, can you talk about art and what an artist does or is, or how an artist bees in the world?
I think an artist is anyone that takes what's in their head and puts it out there for other people to see. In any form. I mean, it could be dance, it could be music, it could be to see or to hear, whatever. Having something inside you, some kind of vision, or I could call it creativity, but whatever you want to call it, having something, some thoughts in your brain that you somehow put on paper or on film or something for the rest of the world to view, kind of putting your ideas out there in a way that might be a little thought-provoking. It might, not that I have ever intentionally decided to be thought-provoking, but my thoughts might be different than yours or Beverly's, and so therefore if I put something out there, it's going to make you kind of like, oh, I didn't think of that, or oh, what does that mean, or, you know, kind of get a dialogue going.
Sure. So you're talking about creativity or what's inside. What nurtures your imagination as an artist?
Visual things. I see things that just for some reason they grab my attention and I don't even know why. I'd have to analyze to say why. But like I said, when I started this series, it was my friend's face right there, and something about it just like, oh, made me stop and look. I've always done people, that's been my thing, but in the last year or two I noticed at certain times, maybe because I'm driving a lot to my daughters to babysit my grandkids, and so I'm looking at and I'm driving early in the morning, I'm not usually even out of bed, so I'm seeing sunrises, you know. Certain times I know I'm seeing certain landscapes that kind of grab me, so I think my next thing I might start doing some landscapes.
So your future may be a little different than the past as you move forward.
Maybe.
Amanda, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks.